It's always a pleasure to be in the company of Professor Bindu, Professor Mathili. It has been such a learning journey for us at ShikshaLokam and Mantra4Change to learn from always the people in the education sector, people who are also the academicians. So I think it's a great privilege to be able to share from a practitioner's lens of what has worked for us as we are thinking of solving this challenge of education inequity at scale, along with partners. So the approach that we have taken is that no one organization, no one individual can really solve a challenge of this complex nature. So maybe the magic lies in a simple recipe, and many people trying to contextualize and customize and personalize that recipe for their own needs. So that's the larger idea that I'm going to share with all of you. And that's the first-hand experience of my team and myself leading this across different states in the country. But before that, I thought that maybe because Geeta said you can type, so maybe you can type. I'll share my screen, but I'll request you to share what comes to your mind when you hear the word agency. Awesome. Ownership, choice, to lead, confidence. Absolutely. And in our work, so it's so much about, so in the work at ShikshaLokam and Mantra, we always call that agency is about three feelings: that do I have what I need? Because of what I have, I can I apply that to make a difference in my own life? And because now I have done it, I could apply it. Have Has my courage really gone beyond to wish for more? So can I wish? So I can, and I wish. And taking this forward, we always say that agency is so much about realizing your own power to make a difference. And because the topic that we thought it would be interesting to discuss with this group was about restoring agency, we said, what is restoring agency? Each of us always have had the power to make a difference. But maybe because of the condition that we grew up in, because of the society that we grew up in, sometimes that agency gets latent. It becomes it gets suppressed. So it's not something, and we are very consciously using this verb called restoring and not developing or creating agency, because we really believe that agency is present in every single individual. It is inherent. All we need to do as change makers, as organizations who are playing this role of enabling, whether as civil society, whether as government organizations, whether as academic organizations, how might we restore the agency of people we work with so that everybody can solve their own challenges, everybody can do something to be able to resolve this big web of problems that exist around us. And that's why today I thought we'll share some practical examples of what is possible around this idea of restoring agency. Systems change is such a big word, and obviously, rightfully so, it's also very complicated and complex. But through our experience, we realize that it's not, maybe the problem is complex, but our approach need not be complex. We can try simple things that can work at scale. And that is how you can actually root it in the principle of restoring agency and how it can work. But before I talk more, maybe, let me take you on this time travel and share a story. So, because we are based in Karnataka, this is one of the villages from peri-urban Bangalore near the Anekal Education Block. So it was in June 2020 when, all of us suddenly, because COVID wave was at its peak and everybody was under shutdown, under lockdown, and we was not asked to move around. Children were locked at their homes, schools were shut down, and nobody knew when schools will reopen. And the biggest problem that us as people working in education system we were worried about is While people are obviously prioritizing health, what happens to the learning experiences of children? Will they keep sitting at home with no support from outside, as in what can they do with their time? And we were working with these teachers in Anekal Education Block here in Bangalore, and we said, what is it that can be done? And then a teacher said, let me just go and talk to the parents and we'll see what parents think about it. Is it really a need that they are also feeling that children need to be engaged at home? And this idea was born that, you know, like how in, so, okay, again, let me paint this picture. I'm sure for most of us on this call, it's a reality you have seen, you've been on field and you've seen this. Children who come to government school, usually in their houses, you have very limited spaces. It would be two or three children, a single room. Parents are also there. And when both parents are also at home, there's television playing, maybe the cooking is going on. So children did not have any dedicated space for them to get into the routine of learning every day. Right? So the parents were calling this out very clearly that what they thought was missing was a dedicated space, a routine for children to engage in learning. And that's where this idea was born that, hey, can we, like school, can we set up a reading corner at homes? And this is something that was done in one home first in one of the villages near Anekal Education Block. And then very quickly, as the teachers and the block education officer and the school principals discussed this idea, parents took it up. And in different, now you see on your screen, there were reading corners that were getting created in different homes in different shapes and sizes and forms. Depending on what the students like, they made it their own space. And it did not stop there. So what was surprising to us was that while it happened in a Anekal education block, when this idea beyond June of 2020, when it was shared with the district education officer in Tumkur, he loved this idea and he discussed with his team to say, how do we take it? How do we share this idea with the parents in Tumkur region? And then suddenly within less than 3 months, these reading corners started appearing in more than 48,000 homes. And as I talk to you today, this idea of setting up reading corners at home has been taken to the state of many districts across Karnataka and even Uttar Pradesh. Right? So the reason I'm telling this story to you is to show how simple this idea is. Because it was doable, you saw how quickly it spread. So many more people were able to do it. Teachers were able to talk about it across geographies. Parents across geographies were able to adapt it. Children across geographies were excited about it and they wanted to participate in the process. So clearly, it was impactful. It was able to offer something that people saw value in. And last and the most important that we see the power of this idea was that it was adaptable. It was not a standardized way of saying that this is how it should be set up. You know how we do it in the form of adult tinkering labs. You give clear specifications and say this is how it should be set up. Because the moment we think scale, sometimes the first idea that comes to our mind is how do we standardize it so that the quality doesn't go down. And our experience has been that you can actually think of standards at scale. The power of impact will come out at scale only when the idea is adaptable, when it lends itself to contextualization. So, coming back to this idea of reading corner at home, this is how we define a micro improvement. A simple problem that a stakeholder, a leader, a teacher, a parent is able to see in their context, and they say, what can I do about it? Because many a times when we see a challenge, we are always stuck with this feeling that what can somebody else do about it? What can government do about it? What can, parents will say, what can teachers do about it? We have always faced this situation where all of us are expecting somebody else to solve the problem for us. So we took a flip narrative. We said, what if we see a problem and we only solve it? So we design the micro improvement that we can do based on the resources that we have, based on what is within our locus of control, and then will that micro improvement or a series of micro improvement actually compound to create mega impact. right? So micro improvement as an approach is something that we have really been experimenting with, and now implementing it across different states with partner ecosystem, with the government education system, to say that how can any program, any change initiative be given the flavor of adaptation, flexibility, so that any school leader can actually modify it to suit their context. Can even people be encouraged to identify the problem that they see is the most important in their context and then solve it? So these micro improvements are basically, the reason we use the word micro is also because it is not some very radical change for them for which they have to change their entire lifestyle in their day, but it could be plus one to their everyday routines. For example, as a school principal, I'm anyways doing a parent teachers meeting. How can I do it better the next time so that more parents participate, so that it becomes a more engaging space between teacher and parent? So whatever problem statement they define, they are able to solve for it, right? And the beauty is that we have seen now how micro improvements can be led by anybody. It can be led by school leaders, by school principals in their own context. Like in this picture, you see how morning assembly as a space has been completely changed, as a process has been modified. You see how I mean, all of us know how government schools are sometimes limited by space and resources, but here's a learning circle of teachers that CRP, that cluster resource person, is driving so that teachers can share best practices with each other. Here's a picture from Punjab where a parent teachers meeting is being led as a very experiential space for parents so that they can see how children are actually engaging in the learning process in the school. And like this, we have millions of examples today. These are micro improvements that are being led by teachers inside the classroom so that the teacher child interaction is getting better. There are examples of micro improvements that are led by young college students who are trying to solve a challenge that they face is very important. For example, on the left hand side here, you see this is a group of college students who are doing an awareness campaign on against drug abuse. There's a young college student who is conducting an after school class for children in her neighborhood. So whatever they can do to be able to solve problem that they see that is around them. And not only college youth, these are women in the community who are holding spaces like Chopals, who are bringing women together to say, why is your girl dropping out of school? Why is your boy not going to school regularly? So whatever is the challenge that they see, they come together to design one micro improvement and actually implement it. Now, why I'm emphasizing on micro improvement and implementing it and how is it related to agency is very simple. Most of us, when we expect others to solve it, our problems, is because we feel that we are not capable enough. And that has happened because of the repeated failures that we may have seen in the past. But the reason, when the very fact that when people carry out these micro improvements in their own context, they see quick wins. So the way these micro improvements are defined is that they see success, they see evidence of success. And that awakens, that again restores the sense of agency that they have. And in our work, we call it leadership. We say if somebody is able to drive continuous micro improvement, they are actually developing their own leadership. And leadership is all about agency, like you defined. When I asked what is agency, you said leadership, you said ownership. And that is precisely what we are seeing is working. That the moment people start driving these micro improvements, you implement something, you see success, you are motivated. There's this beautiful cycle of behavior change, habit building. There's so much of theory that I'm sure Professor Bindu and Maithili can share more about. But this whole idea of micro improvement is rooted in those theories and those concepts. If people do more of these and they see success, their belief in themselves goes up and they become better leaders. So the whole frame that we are trying to introduce is that leadership is not positional. We don't have to say that, oh, because you are a CEO or you are a school principal or you are an education leader sitting in the state office, only you can drive change. Anybody can drive change. Anybody can become a leader. And more importantly, leadership is a habit and it's not a job title. And with this theory of change, we are moving forward to say, imagine if across 1 million public schools of the country, if teachers, school leaders, and community leaders around that school start driving micro improvements every month, just one micro improvement every month, we will see more than 12 million micro improvements a year. And imagine the compounding power of these micro improvements across years. So even if a school leader or a school community starts it today, by 2030, it would have really created impact, multidimensional impact across parental participation, across pedagogy, across culture of the school, and so many other aspects that we define the school development framework around, right? So I want to take a pause here to say that the whole idea is that systems change is complex, yes, but systems are made of people and of processes. And if these people can take responsibility of improving the process, whichever is in their control, as a series of micro improvements and not as one shot reform, wouldn't systems change be an obvious outcome? So one is this question, and second, I want to pause here for another question, that if this process is making sense to you, this process of restoring agency, of nurturing leadership towards systems change, what do you think it will accelerate the process of restoring agency? Because each one of us can maybe work with one school, two school, 10 schools. But is there a process? Are there pathways that will really accelerate this process? So two questions. One, what do you think about this approach? And second, what do you think will accelerate this process? I'll stop sharing my screen, Geeta, if it's okay at this point in time, and we can engage in some conversation. And after that, again, if you want, I can share.
Varun, I think you've raised your hand. Please go ahead.
Hey, thank you. Hi, Khushboo. Thanks. It was really interesting to hear all the stuff that you guys had done, and just had this question. Slightly taking a step back from your last reflection question. I was also thinking of like what would barriers be for so many people to adopt micro improvements. Like for us or for people who are really interested in this change, it's automatic. There's a motivation for systems change, for change to be present in every school or every hospital or wherever you're working in. um, and and at a holistic level, 10 million or 50 million sounds like a great change story and a change narrative. But individually, for those 10 million people, maybe 20% is motivated. I don't know, 40% is on the wall, and the other 40% is not interested at all. So, are there any external motivation factors that you infuse in order to also nudge this initial cohort along? Like, basically, do you strategize for making this movement happen, or are there like any minimum conditions that are required already to be present to even attempt such movements?
Thank you, Varun, for that reflection and those questions. I think you basically again brought it back to the same question. When what you are calling as barriers is maybe that will help us understand what could be the enablers and accelerators of this process. Um, so before I answer, is it okay if I just leave it to the group again to share what do they think will create barriers for our stakeholders in adopting this approach? If you have worked with a school principal or a teacher or any parent, when you think that what would prevent them from taking up any micro improvement, what could those barriers be? And hence then as designers, we will have to say, how do we remove those barriers so that people are motivated, incentivized, encouraged to do more and more of it? So if it's okay, I'll just pause for maybe 30 seconds to see if any ideas are brewing on your head, in your mind. Else I'm happy to share again from my experience of what has worked for us.
Sure, sure. I can also quickly share from a health perspective what I do. I don't work in education, sorry, but I used to. I used to work in public education before. But at least in with the nurses that we work in the public health system, um, we our program involves suggesting a small change to the way nurses deal with families of patients who come to hospitals. So the main barrier for them would be like just knowing that they have to adopt something new now is like, hey, this is additional work. Many a time we try to tell the administrators it is not additional work, it is the same work but being done in a different way. And in the medium term, even not even long term, it will save your hospital a lot of time and potentially other benefits. So just the thought that okay, there's an external program which is coming in and telling us to do something different is too big for them to comprehend at times.
I just want to add one point here is that, when we start a program, we probably need to also think of exit strategy, think of sustainability, whatever ideas that comes to our mind, because it's a fact that any program will come to an end, 2 year, 3 year, 5 years, and then the observation is that things go back to where we started. I mean, it has happened in Odisha NITI Aayog project, in Jharkhand, in other projects, and all these years have been. So, I mean, I really appreciate this kind of micro improvements, which catch up with the people, because they see the value, they see the meaning of it, and they also see that it's not a kind of extra cost that is required. So it's so important to strategically, brainstorm this kind of ideas when we go to implement programs. Because otherwise, BCG will come, McKinsey will come, they will do a lot of diagnosis, they will come out with theory of change. And then we find out that, at the end of the day, they don't really stick when the project date is over.
If I'll just one thing I've realized is when we want change, is the feedback mechanism, the mentoring and feedback mechanism. I find that to be the most difficult, but also the most impactful. We need to find ways, and to me, we have to find ways with using technology to have a feedback loop or a feedback mechanism to any change we want to bring about, however small or large, because it's when you're trying something new, anyone at any level is trying something new, they always want feedback to see if it's not enough that one good feedback is with teachers. I've noticed the best feedback is the response from the students. If students respond positively and if they have a positive experience, that's the best feedback for teachers. But apart from that, they want feedback from other peers, adults, and I feel that to sustain, to Suman's idea, right? To sustain, we've always been thinking exit, and I've changed that. I feel we can never exit. Programs exit, but people don't, and therefore, how do we sustain? When I say people, I don't mean individual persons. I don't mean like a Suman or a Bindu exiting or not exiting. I mean the role that you've been playing in this community, and goes back to the community of practice. Right? So how do we sustain the community and have people in different roles sustain it over time? And I think that is really I mean, I have experiences of seeing improvements there, but how do we make it stick in the long term is something I'm still looking at. And definitely, we have to leverage technology in whatever way to address the scale. Yeah, thank you.
Can I go? Yeah, so just reflecting on Varun's question, which you parked, that micro, what stops them for taking up micro improvement, which I felt could be fear of failure, one thing, and second, whether the individual who is trying, which Bindu ma'am mentioned that they're trying it new place, new thing, new person. So they actually, like for me, I actually question whether it's an improvement or it's a decline, whether I'm doing betterment for the society or not, because it's very new. Nobody have tried it, or if they've tried, have not got proper result of it. So that is always a fear, which maybe feedback could be a way where that person can feel confident to take up that step and then try new things.
Thank you, Yogi. That's a beautiful point. So if I can just maybe, our experience, you already, all of you collectively kind of identified some of these factors that can really either impede, so slow down, or really accelerate this process. So first, I'll start from where Yogita stopped. So Yogita, sometimes the biggest barrier that we have seen is, especially in any kind of public system, that there is fear of failure, but more than that, there's fear of consequence. There's very little appreciation that our people in the system get because of something wonderful that they have done, but there's a lot of punitive action that they can be subjected to if something really goes wrong. So that freedom of prototyping, of experimentation that we get in the civil society, many of the actors in the government system, in the public system, don't have that flexibility. So that means it's a lot about culture. And I think in my opening remark, I did mention that how agency has been very systematically and systemically taken away because of the condition that we have grown into, right? So the first thing is that definitely if you have to introduce this, the idea has to be introduced to the stakeholders that what is micro improvement, and hey, it is okay. So it has to be legitimized in their eyes that it's okay to do micro improvements, and somebody who is in authority is actually telling me that you should do it. So how we have done it is that we actually co-create programs with different partners. I can actually share my screen. Yeah. So one is just socializing the idea of micro improvements by co-creating programs using this approach with the government itself, saying as government department, your current care could be foundational literacy and numeracy. All of us in education system are talking about Nipun Bharat. I'm sure with every other department, government departments have certain focus areas. So keeping their current care in mind, can we design a program? Can we co-create a program using this approach where leaders and the stakeholders in the system get exposed to saying this is how a micro improvement can look like? Like that reading corner example that I shared, or a parent-teacher meeting example that I shared, it could be in the context of improving the foundational literacy numeracy outcomes. Now, helping shape these campaigns, I'm saying, hey, it's okay. And the government is saying that you should implement it. That means it's a legitimate idea and I am supposed to try it. And when they do it for 2 or 3 cycles, for example, in the state of Bihar, we are working with the Department of School Education for middle school, 6 to 8, grade 6 to 8. And we said, can we introduce project-based learning as a methodology and for the teachers in science and maths across all these schools. So we worked with the SCRT, the State Council for Education, Research and Training, in co-creating a curriculum on how project-based learning can be integrated to the existing science textbook and maths textbook. We did it with a lot of other NGOs so that many more people are getting socialized, are getting acquainted with this approach. Then we designed a capacity building program for the teachers along with the department again to say, how do you do these micro improvements? How do you apply these learnings into your classroom? And then this is introduced, but like now how Professor Bindu was telling, that how will it sustain? How will it stick? You have introduced an idea, but sustenance need community. Can I now really come together with other teachers who are trying these out, who are failing at certain things, and can we share with each other our frustrations? Can we learn from each other? What is it that is working with others that is not? So how do we then bring in these elements of community, these platforms for celebration? I already touched upon the fear of consequence. So now can I really work with government to create these celebration mechanism where teachers and school leaders who are driving these micro improvements and really doing it well are getting recognized at a district level, at a block level, at a state level. So introducing these as program elements has really worked with us. Second, I think Yogita, it was you who said, I may not be sure that what I know is the right micro improvement. Is that the right approach? Will it be +1 or -3? So for that, what we do is how do you make a repository of micro improvements that have been curated by experts and practitioners as a repository that they can just dip into, that they can just discover from. And this is again where technology comes very handy. We do these as ShikshaLokam. We bring together organizations, different subject matter experts who co-create these micro improvement projects. For example, we'll work with an Akanksha Foundation to say how do you create such an environment where children are taking up responsibilities in driving school level processes. We'll work with an EduWeave that is working on early childhood development to say what are the micro improvements that an Anganwadi worker or an Anganwadi supervisor can take up. Right? So these are expert curated micro improvements that are now available as a library to anybody to find, search from. And here technology comes very, very handy. And now with the power of AI, you can actually make it discoverable so easy without friction. So I can just like speak to a bot and I can say, how do I improve enrollment in my school? I'm such a such school principal sitting in Assam. What do I do? And the AI can look into this repository and can actually provide you with 10 or 15 such micro improvements that have been tried and tested. Right? So that's the second aspect of how do I enable access to resources that will remove my fear, that will allay my fear of trying things. And third thing that I wanted to talk about was which Professor Bindu earlier alluded to, is the power of technology. Many a times, great ideas like feedback loops, how do we create these mentoring mechanism possible? It remains limited because we are not able to think how technology can be woven into the program. Now, if we make these data points visible, if we keep celebrating the leaders and teachers who are doing these well, using the power of technology, it can become self-fueling. The excitement keeps building up. And that is what, again, as a team of partners and as ShikshaLokam, we have been able to do is creating these shared capabilities as open technology blocks that anybody can use that work with government to create even like a digital public infrastructure for the country that is available. On anybody being able to search micro improvements, being able to create micro improvements, being able to implement micro improvements and share those evidences successfully with the entire ecosystem. And that is the power of technology in terms of making the success visible, really amplifying the stories of success so that it sticks, so that the change sustains, and it starts taking the form of this of habit, what I was earlier referring to. So again, I'll take a pause here. Any other thoughts, questions that are coming to your mind?
Khushboo, if you look at the chat, I think Maitli and Ananya have made some comments. So
Sure, I'll read it now.
Yeah.
So why don't we, because I see there are only a few people on this call. So Professor Mathli, do you want to talk about it? And then maybe from your conversation, more questions, more thoughts can come into the discussion.
No, I was basically responding to Suman's question about my internet is unstable, so I'm not able to turn on the video. I was responding to Suman's question about stickiness and trying to draw linkage to the idea of agency that you had brought in earlier.
Sure. Thanks, Professor Mathli. So in terms of, again, the going back to the topic of the discussion today is, we said, how do we restore agency towards the larger goal of systems change? I think our experience has been really, really encouraging. Again, it's not just me talking about as a person. There's this entire partner ecosystem now, and Shikshagraha is an interesting concept, a movement, an imagination, a network of networks. However, see, the thing that I try to avoid is to put strict jargons and frameworks around things, because that is where what I'm trying to say, your mind already starts filtering, because some words may have different meanings in our minds. So however you want to describe it, but Shikshagraha, we have started weaving as a movement where different partners come with their own theory of change. All we are saying is that what is that unifying approach that we can define for ourselves? Can we agree on certain core principles that at scale, only thing that will work is the agency of the leaders and the teachers and basically the actors in the system, because I'm sure not all of you are working in education, but in your system, whosoever are the actors who are supposed to carry out that activity, that role, if they believe in their leadership and they are able to drive these micro improvements in their own everyday routines, wouldn't the system become like a self-healing, self-improving system? And that is the whole idea behind Shikshagraha, saying how do we work with government? How do we work with civil society organizations? How do we work with self-help groups? How do we work with organizations who are working on youth leadership development? And say, whatever you feel is the right problem to solve, please go ahead. As long as we are able to establish that linkage to say, this is how children's learning experience is getting better because of my action, and then demonstrate it, share it like a micro improvement that anybody can do. So a young student, a college student is doing something magical in Delhi. How can another college student sitting in Pondicherry get influenced by it? And those are the larger ideas that we have been working on. So Professor Bindu, Geeta, I'll maybe pause here and be guided by you on how you want to drive the rest of. I'm looking at the time. It's already 5:16. If you have any particular direction to offer or any questions that you think I should talk more about.
So,
Khushboo, just one quick follow-up. Take it as a question or a comment. So these micro improvements and agency also requires a kind of a support structure, especially in the government schooling system, given how much teachers have had to face flack. So many a time we have seen that the civil society organizations or an outside organization have had to intervene on behalf of the teachers to be able to make these efforts at changes. So I just wanted you to reflect a little bit on the support structure that is also required for beleaguered players within the system.
I think you rightly called it as support structures, Professor Mathli. So as I was saying, if the moment we realize that we are the supporting actors and not really the doers, so to say, the actual change makers in this process, so then we take up our role as what is it that the teachers or that actor needs in that moment as support, so that they can still carry out the micro improvement and we don't do that micro improvement on their behalf. I think one other thought that's coming to my mind is, I think Suman, you were alluding to it earlier when you said the theory of change and people come with this very strict definition of what is the right problem to solve. This is the only way. Oh, FLN is the only thing that needs to be solved. Or no. Socio-emotional skill is the only thing that really needs to take the precedence. And this. So I think sometimes all of us make it so much about, make the conversation so much about this versus saying everything is important. And it's okay if the teacher thinks that at this moment infrastructure is the right problem to solve, or if the teacher thinks or the school leader thinks that maybe community participation is the biggest problem to solve. So believing in their judgment, in their sense making ability to say what they think is the most important concern needs to be solved now, and being okay with it is something that has really worked for us. So not going in with a fixed or fixated theory of change, or a very strict way of saying this is step 1, this is step 2, this is step 3, and being flexible around it. So we call it the whole approach of what is their cares and concern, and how can we support them? How can we enable them to be able to solve that first, and then come back to number 2. So the co-creation is all about they sharing, us sharing, and not we topifying, or just kind of saying this is the thing that you should do, has really worked for us. Sorry, that's a Varun, I'm reading your comment.
So while you're reading, Khushboo, the question I wanted to ask is, how are you growing this Shikshagraha network or community? If people who want to join in, how do they join, or how do they participate, or try and come into the community?
Sure. Thanks, Professor Bindu. That's a question I would definitely love to answer. Before that, maybe a quick comment on what Varun wrote. It's more about how do you take everyone in the system along. The reason I was showing how, even to introduce the idea, we work with the government system, we co-create program with them. The simple reason is that all of us are limited by who on top of us are saying what, right? Even in our organizations, if you go with a wonderful idea and if the boss says, no, you can't do it, or I will create conditions against you trying that idea, then it won't work, no matter how creative you are. So even in the government department, we take everybody along. So in fact, the success of a block education officer now rests on how many improvements teachers in their block are doing, or the school leaders in their block are doing. So Varun, to your point, I think taking along that matron is equally important. And what is that micro improvement that matron can drive at her level or his level is equally important. So we define, I don't want to get into the maths of it, but we have I love that slide being a math student, is the concept of delta and sigma, saying at every level of the hierarchy of the system, new processes get added. Like a teacher is responsible for certain thing, but a cluster resource person is responsible for certain added things, right? So a micro improvement for a CRP in the education system could be, how do I improve my cluster academic meetings? For a district education officer, it could be, how do I improve the data-driven decision making at my level? But they also are equally responsible for driving these micro improvements at their level. So it's a vocabulary across the system. And we make sure that when we create program, everybody has some micro improvement to carry out. It's not only that only the people at the worker bees, so to say, have to carry out micro improvements and the bosses can relax. So it's leadership at all levels, and hence micro improvements at all level is what we define. And that's why then the matrons, so to say, quote unquote, in our system get co-opted in the design process. Varun, I hope that slightly addresses the comment that you made.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now to Professor Bindu, because we are at the end of our duration. Shikshagraha is if you're working in education, you're working with child in any capacity, you're working with the mothers of children, I think Shikshagraha is a network that is open to you, and all of us can give a lot of value to this movement. To give you an example, now the self-help groups, the women collectives, are actually part of Shikshagraha, where they are saying that what is it that we can do to make sure that no child in the village is skipping school, is actually going to school regularly, or no girl child is being made to drop out of school. So such very socio-cultural issues around education, which government department is not saying that girls should not come to school, but it is the villagers or the family who's deciding that no, today my daughter will not go to school. So to address that, we are leveraging the power of these unusual allies, as we call it, where self-help group, these women are women with voice, with a lot of credibility in the community. So they are holding these spaces. They are making sure that parents are committing to sending their children to school regularly. Then the next level is that they will make sure that children are actually spending time on learning activities even outside school hours. So a lot of such possibilities are there. If you can think of or your organization and saying that these are the simple acts, micro improvements that my stakeholders can take to support learning experience of children. It can be 3 degrees of separation. Shikshagraha doesn't mind. For Shikshagraha, every step matters, and so every contribution matters. So if you just want to be part of it, please reach out to us, write to us. There's a website called shikshagraha.org. All the details are there. And we would love for you to come up with ideas on how you think your mission can contribute to this movement. Nobody owns this movement. I'm not the sole keeper of this movement. My team is not the keeper of the movement. All of us are. And it's active across different states. So, no matter whether you're working in Assam or Rajasthan or MP, please take the movement there.
Okay, I think I'll come in now. I think thanks, Khushboo. You actually made the whole session so interactive. So I don't think, and glad that we did not have to stick to the format of talk and then interact. So I'm happy about that. So, but we do have 5 minutes. If there are any questions, we are open to take more questions. I think there was one question from Ananya in the chat. Also a comment. Khushboo, can I read it? There's one that Ananya has just made. Do you want to respond to that, or we could take it otherwise?
Yes, Ananya, great question. So that's why I, first and foremost, I called out that micro improvements are something that is adaptable. So it doesn't force you that this is the pen and this is what you have to use. But it says that in my school, I tried this and it worked. And for example, in enrollment, because I took that example earlier, something called Our School Chale as a campaign worked in Haryana. Now, if somebody in Karnataka has discovered that as a micro improvement, they will say, how do I apply this in my context? So what did they do? So because a micro improvement has steps, that the objective of this improvement was this, that I would want to improve the enrollment in my school. The step was that I first sat with my teachers. I made a plan of this awareness campaign in the community. Then I identified the lanes and the distribution, things like that. It's very actionable steps. So when you get that kind of a asset, you can actually then say, in my context, I don't want to do it like this, but this step, I want to do it differently. So it allows for configurability. Configurability and customization are implicit aspects of design principle of micro improvement. Right?
Thanks, Khushboo.
We do have time for one more question, if there is anything.
So Khushboo, I have one question in terms of currently what are kind of, couple of challenges that you are facing, which is like a big challenge for you?
Do you mean in terms of this approach, taking this approach to the system?
I mean, yeah, how the system is resisting or taking it forward, and what are the challenges you are facing?
I think in the initial days, Suman, there was a lot of challenges because the new, I shouldn't say it's a new idea. See, manifestation of these ideas have existed in different sectors, but how would it apply in the education system was something that was new. And now that different states, we have stories from Bihar, UP, Haryana, we have stories from Andhra Pradesh, from Karnataka. So now it's not so difficult. It's always taking for government, what we have learned is looks for precedence. And the moment you can show that, hey, this state has done it like this, then they are open. Then it's more about saying that, hey, what do you want to improve as the state of, say, Madhya Pradesh? And now can we come together and design micro improvements around it? For us, the biggest challenge, I would say, it's not a challenge, it's more about it's a journey, right? So for every state, we have to work. We do not go forward unless the state commits its own resources, unless the state commits for co-creation. Right? It's very easy. The moment I go and say, give me permission and I will do it, the state will say, go, I will sign an MOU, do it. But the moment you say, no, you have to come to the table, the SCRT has to come and design it, that takes a lot of to and fro. And we have now learned that it's okay to go slow in the beginning and get that commitment. Otherwise, going forward, you will always feel stuck.
Geeta, since we began a couple of minutes late, would you accommodate one more question?
Sure, Maithili, please go ahead. I hope, Khushboo, that should be okay with you. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Khushboo. Now, I just wanted to find out from you, what would you describe as a glue that holds Shikshagraha together?
It's a great question, Matli. And for us, we have called it out as principles because we said if Shikshagraha is a movement, then we can't have methodologies and approaches, but principles is something that should act as the glue. And there are 4 core principles. One is this whole idea of agency, that Shikshagraha as a movement is designed to restore agency for all the actors in the network. Obviously, the teachers and the school leaders, but also the civil society, also the government actors. So how do you, whosoever is designing at whatever level, are they being true to this principle? Second is collective action. So it's going beyond collaboration, going beyond just partnerships and really coming together to design collectively, co-create. And then grit, saying no, like I think Professor Bindu, you said that it's not easy, these are not easy problems. And exit is, it's good to think of exit, but it will require perseverance, it will require grit. Things will not be easy. We will go 3 steps forward and maybe something will happen and we may have to go 5 steps behind. So being ready for those kind of situation is okay. So like this, the principles are the glue, Professor Mathley, if I can leave with that.
Okay.
Go ahead, Geeta. You can close it.
Fine. Thank you. So thanks so much, Khushboo, actually, for this very engaging and quite a brainstorming conversation, I would rather say. And I think the title of the topic itself about restoring agency and the emphasis that you made that, there has been more effort in terms of removing the agencies at different levels was very important for us to remember. And I think it becomes all the more important when we are talking about Techquity as well, because this is an emerging space. So, and I was thank you for bringing up the point that it's not the workers alone who carry and the burden. Instead, it's also different agencies are co-opted in taking these accountability. And I think maybe also we need to just direct in terms of how do we also address the systemic stereotypes, injustice, and prejudices that we carry. So it really opened up a conversation on that front. So and this is a movement, and movement is very dynamic, and the conversations will also continue to go on, I believe. So I think we had a good start on that, and thank you all the audience for the for the engagement, and thanks again to the whole team, and thanks again to your team, to Khushboo, for coordinating and supporting with the required information. Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.